Hi Year 5, it's Mrs Gibbons here, hope you're all well. Okay, so this week in our reading, we are learning to use book talk this session, and we're going to be looking at a text from a book called Everest 1953, The Epic Story of the First Ascent. Okay, so I will read out to you the text that we're looking at first of all, and this is actually the prologue to the book, and it's called Our Mountain. For British climbers of the 1920s and 1930s, Everest was quite simply our mountain. It didn't matter that it was over 4,500 miles away on the border of two of the most remote countries in the world, countries that weren't even part of the British Empire. To paraphrase the poet Rupert Brooke, it was a foreign field that would be forever England. The British had measured it, named it, photographed it, flown over it, and died on it. And so they assumed that one day a British mountaineer would be the first to its summit. Everest was measured in the mid-19th century. It stands in the middle of the Himalayas on the border of Nepal and Tibet, and like many mountains, marks both a physical and political boundary. Even though none of the surveyors ever set foot on its slopes, the Great Trigonometric Survey of British India was able to measure its height with astonishing accuracy from observation points over 100 miles away. They estimated it to be 29,002 feet, 27 feet shorter than the current official height. Breaking with convention, instead of retaining its local name, Chomolungma, they christened it Mount Everest in honour of George Everest, a former chief surveyor. At about the same time, the sport of mountaineering was growing in the European Alps. British climbers were very competitive, making first ascents of many peaks in Switzerland and France, and in 1857, establishing the world's first mountaineering society, the Alpine Club. Within a few years, most of the high mountains of the Alps had been climbed, and the more enthusiastic mountaineers had begun to look further afield for new challenges. So, obviously, in our book talk session, we annotate the text with our thoughts, our questions, anything we might be inferring from the text. We might write down any points that we've noticed. So I'm obviously going to start off with giving you a few examples of the things that I might have wondered or spotted as I was reading this text, and then I will leave you to obviously carry on and do your own observations. So if we were to look at the front cover, some of the things that have occurred to me is obviously this is a non-fiction book about this group of people who climbed Everest. So I'm wondering, is this the summit here that they were obviously trying to get to? Is that Mount Everest in the background? I'm also wondering, these people who've been on this huge journey, where is all their equipment? Was someone else carrying it for them, or did they just do the ascent in the things they were wearing? How did that work? So that's something I'm wondering. Also, I've just made a note here, because this is a word that we might not use that often, that ascent means a climb to the summit of a hill or mountain, and the summit is the very top. I'm also wondering, when was this picture taken? Was it before or after the ascent? So you might have a few more questions that you would want to ask about the image that you can see there. So if I move on to the text, okay, so one thing I noticed was this phrase I struggled to say, the Great Trigonometric Survey of British India. Now that looks quite confusing at first, doesn't it? So I've just noted down that trigonometry is an element of maths, and it's some maths that studies relationships between side lengths and angles of triangles. So I think that these surveyors used trigonometry in maths to help them to estimate how high Mount Everest is. So although it's a big word, it just means it's a part of maths where they look at the length of sides and angles of triangles, and they use that to help them work out measurements. Another thing I've noticed is that they estimated it to be 29,002 feet, which is actually 27 feet shorter than the current official height. So I can now do a little bit of maths and work out that now, with sort of more modern technology, Everest is considered to actually be 29,029 feet high. So they were pretty close, weren't they, considering they didn't even set foot on the slope. So I'm not going to make any more comments because I don't want to stop you from coming up with some other ideas yourself. So if you can, in your science book, write down any more things you notice about this text, any more wonderings or definitions of words or things you might like to find out about. Great, I'll let you get on with that and I'll be back tomorrow for session 2. Take care, bye.